Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Polygamist Daughter with Anna LeBaron and Leslie Wilson. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we begin reading chapter 5. My hopes are that you can hear me. I'm off camera today because I'm enjoying laying in this bed right now with no bra on. TMI, I know. But I'm just really, really comfortable. And I wanted to make sure that I got this done because this is going to be a busy week for me. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to do it later on. So, like this video and let's get into it. Chapter 5. Morning dawned with the promise of another scorching hot day, offering no relief from the oppressive trifecta of Mexican heat, sun, and humidity. The air was stifling, limiting our breath and energy. Still, chores beckoned. We couldn't wait for pleasant temperatures or a cloudy day to work. Antonia ordered us to help her clean house, which we did. No questions asked, no complaints issued. We kids knew better than to voice dissatisfaction with any of the adults in our lives or with any circumstances in our lives for that matter. God granted us what we were supposed to have. We couldn't argue with our lot in life. I squeezed water out of an old rag and began wiping down the kitchen table and chairs. Out of the corner of my eyes, I watched as Antonia picked up the thick slabs of yellow foam the children used as bedding. One by one, she took them to remove the dust. As she shook the pallet I slept on, some dirt fell to the floor. Antonia gasped. Of course she did, because she's got to be dramatic. Not a surprise, spontaneous utterance, but a calculated, overly dramatic response intended to garner attention and show her utter disgust. In a loud voice, she proclaimed for everyone in the house to hear. Now, y'all know my Spanish is jacked up, so I'm going to say it in Spanish and hopefully she'll have it in English. Mira, que cochina es Ana. Ni siquiera quita la tierra de su cama antes de dormirse. Look at what a pig Anna. What? Look at what a pig Anna is. She doesn't even remove the dirt from her bed before sleeping in it. Oh, that's so. Why does she always pick with this kid? This is just. I hate when adults do this. Then she burst into cackling laughter as she continued to scrutinize my little sponge bed. She wanted to hurt her feelings. She wanted to shame her. This is verbal abuse. I know people hate when you say stuff like that, but you're intentionally trying to embarrass her. What else is it? If a kid did this to another kid, we would call it bullying. So she's also bullying her. Shame flooded me. I felt blood rushing to my cheeks, and I instinctively covered them with both hands. I wish I can run and hide, perhaps joining the disabled man next door so we can compare our inadequacies. I didn't realize I was dirty, but of course I was. I spent the greater part of the day on dusty Mexican streets, trying desperately to sell homemade items. Though lush greenery grew wild in the tropical humidity, the poverty stricken area we lived in had little grass or foliage at all. Most of the roads I walked were nothing more than dirt and dust that would cling to me and my clothes as I got into bed at night. But Antonia had no compassion for a little girl sent to live far away from her mother. She didn't quietly show me the dirt and offer to teach me how to shake the foam clean each morning or evening. She didn't unobtrusively brush off the dust, allowing me to keep my dignity. No, she didn't. Because she wanted to embarrass her. And we don't even know what the bathing situation is. Like, was it something that she couldn't take a bath each night? Like, we don't know. So for her to do that, even if she could take a bath each night, she didn't have to embarrass her like that. My one prized possession that I had managed to hold on to through all of our moves was an Indian looking leather purse that Teresa and Yolanda, both sister wives of my mother, had given me for my ninth birthday. I didn't care that they'd spent only a few pennies on it at a flea market. The purse was the one thing I owned that had value to me. Oh no. One day, Antonia asked to borrow the purse. She never returned it. I longed to ask her to give me back my purse, but I didn't dare. I felt like I had no right to do so. After all, I played Cinderella to her stepmother. Whether she eventually gave it to Rosa or tossed it in the trash, I'll never know. That's so messed up. I just remember feeling that she had taken from me the only pretty thing I possessed. The weeks went by with the same routine. Then one day I had a fortunate turn of events. The wealthy woman who answered the first door I knocked on took pity on me and bought the entire cake. She told me it would be her family's dessert that night. I couldn't imagine a meal that was followed by dessert. We rarely had anything to eat other than beans and tortillas, sometimes with Spanish rice at every meal. I skipped back to the apartment, cheerful for the first time in days, as I imagined the praise I would receive for my quick work. I climbed the stairs, entered the apartment, and noticed that the house seemed far too quiet. Where was everyone? I walked in, dug the change out of the pocket of my polyester skirt, and plopped it on the rickety kitchen table. You're home early. I turned surprised to see Raphael standing there with an odd look on his face, like he was hungry. A woman brought my whole cake today. I beamed at him as I showed him the pile of pesos on the table. He quickly crossed the floor toward me and petted my hair. You're a good girl, Anita, little Anna. You know how to get into people's hearts, don't you? Oh no, please tell me, please tell me. Okay. Mm, sorry. He twirled several strands of my long blonde hair in his slender fingers. I guess I better go clean up and start warming up beans. What's the rush? Antonia and the kids won't be home for a while. They went shopping at the Mercado, the open air market. Come, let's sit and talk. Y'all, this is not good. I can feel it's not good. I'm going to have to put up a warning for those of you who are new. In the thumbnail, when things are or may be triggering, I put up a little exclamation point in a triangle, and this is giving me that feeling. The moment that he said what he said, I felt that anxiety in my stomach. An intense heat spread up my neck to my cheeks until they felt ablaze. I hoped Raphael wouldn't notice. Ah, you like that idea? He grabbed me by the hand, his thin, clammy hands swallowing my tiny fingers. Come with me. I can't. I have work to finish before Antonia gets home. I tried to pull my hands out of his, but his grip held me tightly. Instead, I stumbled along behind him as he led me to the bedroom and then toward the large bed he shared with Antonia. Oh my goodness, I hate this. Every single book, these people are being violated. It's ridiculous. The tattered bedspread was faded and threadbare. Antonia's not here. I'm the boss now, and I'm saying you don't have to work right now. I want you to sit and rest for a while. He picked me up and plopped me on the bed beside him. My feet didn't reach the floor, so my legs just dangled over the edge. I scooted to the far edge of the bed, but he quickly shortened the distance between us by moving to the middle. My instincts told me to run, but I feared what this forceful man might do to me if I did. I didn't dare defy him. I knew better than to refuse a direct command. Deep in my gut, a burning and churning commenced like it had the first few times police had raided one of our homes. Something was off. Something had interrupted the norm, and I felt powerless to do anything to stop it. I just wanted to get out of that room and as far away from him as possible. Where is everybody? I thought. Such a beautiful girl. Again, he reached over and touched my strands of hair and allowed them to slide down slowly through his fingers. I pushed his hands away, but he wasn't easily deterred. He moved closer to me. Without warning, Raphael placed his hand on my thigh. His breathing got heavier and his voice lowered as he spoke. Frozen by fear, I gave only short, cursory replies. My body stiffened, and the blood from my beating heart pounded between my ears. Let's talk about love, he said. So Raphael is a perv. He's a perv. He leaned in closer to me until his mouth was mere inches from my own, and I nearly gagged on his rancid breath. I turned my face from his. I closed my eyes tight and willed him away with every fiber of my being. I wanted to run away from him, but my body remained frozen. I could scarcely breathe. I I, I, I don't want to talk about love, but you're so beautiful. Someday you'll be my wife. What? Your dad told me so. The man who barely spoke to this child, the man who said, "Get me this coffee," the man who was upset about her getting mud on her and she wasn't allowed to get in his car, is telling another man who has kids that are probably around the same age as her that one day you're going to marry my daughter. Now, I know Urfel is a bad guy, but Raphael is too. And maybe this is part of the reason why Antonia is so mean to Anna is because he realizes or she realizes that her husband is sitting here checking out this little girl. It's sick. It's sick on so many levels. His wife, my stomach churned as his words sunk in. I had never imagined becoming anyone's wife. My days were spent trying to scrounge up enough to eat, to help care for my siblings, to serve the kingdom. I had never truly had a childhood, and now it seemed I would have no future because my father had promised to give me away to this man. To Ervil LeBaron, a daughter was a commodity to be bought and sold. I wasn't worth even being told about his plan. I mustered my strength and courage from where I don't know, quickly ducked under his outstretched arm, jumped off the bed, and fled out of the apartment door, preferring the streets of, oh, I forgot how I say this word, Kate, Catameko. Y'all, it might be wrong. Catemaco. Over being alone with Raphael. After that horrible encounter, whenever the two of us were alone, Raphael started in again. He never forced me. Instead, it seemed he was genuinely trying to woo me by rubbing my back and shoulders or stroking my hair. He believed his touch and whispered affirmations would draw me in. Okay. He believed his touch and whispered affirmations would draw me into him. Raphael wasn't my only suitor. In the months that followed, more of my dad's followers began to casually and routinely approach me about becoming their wives. This is like, it's just sick. It's sick. She's a little girl. She's a little girl who shouldn't even have to be concerned about these pervs that are approaching her and trying to be all up in her space and stuff. It's gross. It's so gross. Once I began to realize that these grown men only initiated advances to me when Antonio wasn't home, I did my best to avoid being at the apartment alone. As a young girl, having my dad's followers casually and routinely approach me about being one of their wives confused me. Still, I knew deep inside I would someday have to marry one of them, thus fulfilling my duty to my polygamous father. The women in our family were never allowed to make up their own minds. The girls had even less freedom. We were commodities. Others ascertained our value and traded us at their discretion. I was too young to understand the leering, touching, and sexually motivated overtures. I just knew how inappropriate the situation felt and how uncomfortable they made me. Sadly, I couldn't get away from that place, and I had no dad or mom to protect me. She's going through it, man. It's ridiculous. She is going through it. I hate that this young girl is experiencing this at every turn. She is being put in this thing. They're trying to groom her, and it's not just by one person. It's like every man that's around her. She cannot in any way feel protected. Chapter 6. My deep sleep was interrupted by a repeated jostling on my arm. Who's that? What? I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes to the morning sunshine streaming through the front windows of Raphael and Antonia's apartment. Get up. Antonia always sounded sharp and annoyed, and this time even more so. I tossed back the thin sheet and sat up on my little foam pallet. Yes, Antonia, what's happening? You're going to Celeria. Am I saying that right? Y'all, I think I butchered this word the last time, and I don't know if it's right. Caloria. Oh, Caloria. You're going to Caloria. They want you there. The bus leaves in an hour, okay? So you need to hurry up. Okay, I stood up and padded off to the bathroom. I tried to run a comb through my tangled hair, but gave up as it snagged on several matted sections. When I returned to the kitchen, Antonia was standing at the small cooktop making mush for the family. She turned around and glared at me, not offering me a bowl of mush. I wondered what I'd done. It seemed awfully early in the day for me to have gotten in trouble. Here are 5 pesos. Don't lose them. You need to go now. You're not taking me? I stared at her in utter amazement, terrified at the thought of making this journey all by myself. Suddenly, the idea of missing breakfast paled in comparison to traveling on a bus by myself to another town. I'd been to the house in Caloria before, but I had never traveled there all alone, and the idea of boarding a bus with total strangers frightened me. I hated knocking on the doors of houses where people I didn't know lived and trying to entice them to buy the cakes and other items we made. But at least in that situation, I had the advantage of just talking with just one person. What if someone on the bus took a liking to the little blonde American girl and snatched me? I'd heard stories of American tourists disappearing during Mexican vacations. I don't know if I can do that by myself. You can and you will. I don't have time for this today. I knew that what she really meant was that she didn't have time for me today. She never had time for me. My heart ached for my mother, for her warm embrace and gentle voice. I missed her so much and wondered when she would come to Mexico to get me. I looked up to see Antonio staring at me, her eyes narrowing. Yes, Antonia, I can do this. Once I left the oppressive house, I tried to embrace a sense of excitement about my day ahead. Something rose up inside of me, and in my mind's eye, I could see myself traveling alone, making this trip without any problem. I didn't have to stay home and clean house under Antonia's critical and disapproving eye. I didn't have to sell cakes door to door. I didn't have to wash clothes until my arms ached. Instead, I got to go embark on an adventure that most kids would only dream of. The gash in my leg had healed, so after I left Antonia's house, I skipped much of the way to the bus station, slowing to a walk when my calves started to cramp up. I drew upon my previous experience traveling by bus with others. I boarded the bus and put my pesos in the square metal can under the watchful eye of the leathery faced driver. I grinned at him to show him I wasn't afraid that I was starting my adventure. He smiled back, revealing stained teeth. I found a seat where I sat up perfectly straight and stared out the window. The trip felt like it took a long time, when in fact it probably took less than 30 minutes. The bus jerked to a stop in front of a large broken down building with cracked plastered walls. The driver called out, Caloria! I stood and excited along and exited along with the other passengers. Though I scanned the crowd, I didn't see a single face I knew among the few people waiting at the station. My fear of being among strangers in a foreign country threatened to override my sense of adventure. But I looked one direction, then the other, and started walking down the main road in the direction of El Centro, the town square. After walking about a or kilometer, that's how to say it, I arrived at the center of the town, which had a roundabout marked by a wooden gazebo, its paint peeling off. Vendors with small carts milled about. Some had long lines of customers, but I had no more money for tacos or paletas. Popsicles? Instinctively, I turned to the right. I recognized a street where I needed to turn. On the corner was a little store that sold necessities and treats like bottled Coca Cola and other indulgences we never got. I remember buying toilet paper there one day. I continued down that street and arrived at the concrete house where I had stayed once before. Though it was only one of the nicest and cleanest on the block, it still had cement floors and rats that would come out at night, scurrying the length of the ledge at the top of the wall. The wall did not go completely up to the ceiling. Instead, there was a narrow space for ventilation between the wall and the roof. I opened the door and called out, Hola. A woman I recognized as Teresa and Yolanda's mother came from the kitchen into the front room. She wore a long skirt and a white long sleeve button down shirt, buttoned all the way to the top of her neck. Anna, what are you doing here? Antonia sent me. She told me to come here. No, no, no. She rattled off long rant in Spanish about how Antonia didn't need to know what she was doing and how much of a burden it was to have to handle so many children. You have to go back. Oh Lord, what are y'all doing? You have to go back to Catamaco right away. She took some pesos from the center pocket of her dark skirt. Here now, go right back and wait for the next bus. Though utterly confused, I didn't think it was my place to question her authority. So I did as I was told and walked the kilometer back to the stopped. I just to the bus stop I just left. I waited for another bus to take me back to Catamaco. But now the sun blazed down on me, my tummy growled, and I couldn't stop licking my lips because they were so dry. Why didn't I get something to drink while I was in Caloria? Thankfully, the bus arrived soon, and again found a seat and shade from the New Day Sun. I smiled and tried to find adventure in going back. Once the bus arrived back to Catamico, I disembarked and headed for the apartment of Raphael and Antonia. I opened the door only to hear shout, "What are you doing back here?" Oh boy, y'all sending this girl all over the place. And it's annoying. It's so annoying. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Did you not understand me when I sent you to Caloria? Where are the pesos I gave you? Implying that I had spent them on myself. Man, please get a drink of water, then I'll tell you the whole story. By the time Raphael, Gabriel, and Hiram had joined us in the tiny kitchen, I felt more gawked at than I'd been on the bus. I shared my tale and then cowered as I waited for the anger to erupt from Antonio's lips. But but though I could see that she and her husband were highly annoyed, they didn't direct their anger toward me. Instead, Raphael and Antonia talked about the crazy lady in Caloria who had sent home the little girl who'd only just arrived. This time, Raphael handed me pesos for yet another bus ride. He squatted down in front of me, his breath hot on my face, as he sternly said, "Go to Caloria and stay there. Do not come back to Catamico, no matter what they tell you. Do you understand?" I gulped and nodded, not trusting my voice to answer him aloud. Any remaining sense of adventure had left. Any enthusiasm vanished, and joy about my day dried up like the hot Mexican sun. I trudged back to the bus stop and waited for the next bus to Caloria. The bus was much more crowded this time. I joined workers on their way to their menial jobs and had no choice but to stand for the entire trip. My legs ached and I felt weak from hunger. Once I arrived back in Caloria, I returned to the concrete house and experienced the same surprise and annoyance that Raphael and Antonia had greeted me with in Catamico. I waited for the adults to stop talking and shouting to explain myself. Raphael said to go to Caloria and stay there. Ultimately, they agreed to let me stay, for which I felt grateful. I don't think I could have faced another bus ride or another walk. No one ever explained their reasoning to me, so I never found out why they had shuffled me back and forth from Caloria to Catamico over that long hot day. But the experience helped me understand my worth, or lack thereof, to all the adults around me. I felt unloved and unwanted, a little girl who was nothing more than a nuisance, with no father or mother around to protect me or to see my needs. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, especially where I ended up that day. I hadn't eaten anything the whole time during any of the bus rides or the short stops before being turned around. I was starving, but that physical hunger paled in comparison to my hunger for someone, anyone to care for me and want me. In Caloria, the adults sent me to the little store nearby on a regular basis. At the time, I thought they trusted me to do a good job, when in all actuality, they couldn't risk being seen in public for fear of the authorities tracking them to my father and other outlaws in our group. Being light skinned, fair haired Americans, we really stood out. Mexican residents always noticed our comings and goings because of that. Plus, our neighbors must have thought it strange that we had so many people cramped into two houses next door to each other. Raina and her family lived next door to Lorna, another of my father's wives. On one of my shopping trips to the little corner store, the teenage daughter of the store owner showed a special interest in me. She was so pretty with her long brown hair, and she seemed so normal. I had quietly observed her going to school on the city bus, carrying her books in her leather mochila, and envied her life I could only dream about. In Spanish, she eagerly greeted me when I entered the store. "Well, look here, it's little Anna." How are you today? She grinned and waved. I told her I was fine and headed for the aisle with coffee. Wait, come talk to me. I eyed her suspiciously and stayed rooted in place. Silly girl, I'm not going to hurt you. Come on, I'll give you a free Coke. She held a glass bottle of soda, something I had so rarely that I could count the times on one hand. I couldn't resist. I hurried behind the counter and she picked me up and placed me next to the cash register. So tell me about your family. I took several gulps of the glorious liquid and enjoyed the fizzy bubbles. My delay tactic gave me time to think. I knew better than to answer questions, and I deflected them with short, abrupt answers. My heart raced and my face flushed. What do you mean? Where are your mom and dad? I don't know, I said truthfully. What's your dad's name? I don't know. I lied. Thankfully, she stopped questioning me. Mom would be so proud of me. The girl's gift of Coke to bribe me into revealing family secrets had been wasted. It was the first time I recall lying to avoid someone finding out about my family, but doing so became easier as time went on. Chapter 7. I listened to Rena's soft alto voice float a melody through the tiny house in Celeria. I was lying on a thin mattress on the floor with no pillow, staring up at the underside of the metal roof and trying to imagine happier times and places, such as when I was with my mom. Why did we have to be apart? Rena finished singing, "Oh, you can't get to heaven," in hushed tones. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she told us the story of attending high school in the United States. For a few brief moments, I imagined a world far from my own living nightmare. The days here weren't any different than they were in Catamico. I earned money to buy food for the family by selling cake slices, and I scrubbed clothes on an old fashioned washboard, hanging them on the clothesline out back to dry. At any given time, we might have anywhere from 9 to 20 of my father's followers and children living under the same roof. That many people produce tons of dirty clothes. Good night, kids. Rena slowly got up off the floor where she had been sitting, leaning against the concrete wall. I could hear fatigue in her grunts. In my heart, I willed her to stay, hoping against hope that she wouldn't leave us alone. But she undoubtedly had work to finish, laundry perhaps, for her own two children and the rest of us who lived there. I sighed quietly as she left, taking with her every trace of safety and protection. I feared the night even more than the day. After the lights went out, I covered my entire body, even my face, with the threadbare sheet I had been given. Though I couldn't get comfortable on the thin mattress, that wasn't what was causing my uneasiness. I couldn't put it into words other than a growing fear of the unknown that weighed heavily upon me. What's going to happen to me and the people I loved? This uneasiness accompanied my fear of what I knew would happen during the night ahead, and it pressed on my chest like one of the cinder blocks from the walls. What is going on? Maybe, okay, it's hopefully nobody's doing anything to her, but my guess is that she said that the rats come out at night, so maybe it's something with that, or maybe we know the other girl used to get peed on. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Within minutes, I could hear them. Hear who? I peeked out from under the sheet and saw giant rats scurrying along the top of the wall below the thin metal roof above us. They were beginning their nocturnal habit of scavenging for any errant morsel they could find. The rats had easy access from the outside to the inside through the ventilation gap at the top of the concrete wall. Ugh. I plunged I plugged my ears, a feeble attempt to drown out the clickety click of their tiny toenails on the cement overhead. "Are you asleep?" I whispered to my little brother Hiram, lying closest to me. No response. I knew I couldn't handle the terror of the night alone, so I crawled stealthily to a mattress 15 feet away from where Celia was also wide awake. So I guess all of her siblings are with her at this place. Can I sleep with you tonight? I asked, knowing full well neither of us would actually experience restful slumber. She didn't answer, but pulled back her sheet and scooted over to make room for me on her mattress. We lay quietly for a few minutes, and then I whispered, I hear the rats. I know, me too. I'm afraid one's going to fall off the ledge and land on me. Celia snuck close to me and said, I'll protect you. I nuzzled my face into her neck and felt her warm breath. I cuddled closer to her and stroked her long blonde hair, a simple act that calmed me. Oddly, I felt something hard. You have a knot or something. Oh my goodness. You have a knot or something. Y'all, I'm so nervous. In your hair, I whispered. Celia brushed her long blonde hair daily until it felt silky smooth, so I was surprised to feel a knot. I sat up and tried to see what it was in the dim light. Suddenly, the knot moved. Oh no! Burrowing half an inch into her locks, I shivered. The knot was alive, and then I screamed, a deep shriek of both shock and terror. It's a beetle. Mexican beetles aren't like the tiny June bugs or beetles we typically see in the United States. These beetles could be as large as a walnut. I'm telling y'all, I would lose my sugar, honey, iced tea. Ain't no way. Celia bolted upright, her muffled screech joining mine. I tried to part her hair to find the beetle that had nestled closer to her scalp, but it was difficult in the dark. As I watched helplessly, Celia frantically dug her fingers into her massive hair. I felt a cold shiver start in my spine and tingle all the way to my neck, down to my fingers, and almost as if the beetle were crawling on me. Finally, I saw something through the air over the two mattresses where Hiram and the others were still asleep, bounce off the wall and fall back onto the floor. It lay still for a few seconds, stunned or perhaps just getting its bearings, and then the giant black beetle scurried off to softer, friendlier surroundings. Probably another mattress, or worse, the hair of another one of my sleeping siblings. Like rats and beetles, it's a lot. It's a lot. Celia whimpered uncontrollably, and I did my best to soothe her. Here, let's lie back down under the covers. The threadbare sheet was a poor barrier between us and the beetles and the rats, but it helped with the mosquitoes. It was certainly better than nothing. A few minutes later, I felt another beetle land hard on top of the sheet near my stomach. It began to crawl slowly towards my head. This time I was prepared. I flicked the sheet underneath the beetle's body, but it didn't budge. I hated to move my hand or any part of my body out from under the sheet because I feared other beetles would scurry into my safe cocoon, but I had no choice. I poked my arm out from underneath the protection of the sheet, reached on top of the thin fabric, and grabbed the beetle. I could feel its body twitching, which scared me, but I managed to hold it and toss the bug as far away as I could. Celia and I looked at the room full of our siblings sleeping peacefully. We were both exhausted from battling the beetles. I don't think I'll be able to go to sleep, I said. I know, me either, she whispered back. I'm afraid the sheet will slip off and one of them will crawl under here. She paused, then shuddered. Or in my mouth. We couldn't take turns like army. We could take turns like army men on watch. I didn't relish the idea. After all, we both desperately needed sleep with a long work day ahead of us tomorrow. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. You go ahead and sleep first. I stroked her hair once more, shivering as my hand passed over the area where I felt the beetle only moments ago. Before long, I heard deep breathing and felt her body relax. Thank goodness someone could sleep. I lay listening, for scratching sounds, my beetle and rat alarm on high alert. The room stayed blissfully silent except for the deep breaths around me. I turned over and with my back towards Celia. Suddenly, someone cranked up the music from the cantina down the street. What had been a soothing melody, a mix of voices and guitar, became a noise fest of Mexican ranchera music with the familiar gritos mexicanos, a Mexican shout during a popular song or celebration that kept me awake. I actually yearned for the long, hot workday, which would be minus the bugs, rats, and music, as I finally fell asleep. It turns out I didn't have to endure another night of pulsating beat. The next day, Rena took her kids along with me and Hiram back to Catamaco. My dad needed her to type up his lengthy sermon and book notes. Celia had been sent to Merida, Merida, to help our older sister Lillian and her husband, Mark, with their small children. Antonia was none too pleased with our intrusion back in her small apartment. We had been in Catamaco a few weeks when on Halloween night in 1978, we were awakened in the wee hours of the morning by a sharp and instant knock at the door. Incessant knock at the door. 6-year-old Hiram, who didn't know any better, groggily got up from his pallet on the living room floor, walked over to the door, and opened it. Suddenly, 5 or 6 federales, Mexican police, herded him out of the way and filed in, spread out, and began searching every room while we watched in terrified silence. They were carrying automatic weapons, so we didn't dare argue with them. I heard loud and gruff orders directed at the adults, and soon all of them were standing up with their hands in the air. I had no idea what was happening. Why were they bothering us? The police held up wanted posters with pictures of people I knew: my father, Mark, Rena, Ramona, and others. Despite Onita's protest, they began removing items from the apartment. I said Antonia's protest. They began removing items from the apartment. Hiram and I avoided the men as much as possible and answered with, "Yo no sé, I don't know." Whenever they questioned us, we had been well trained to give that response to any and all questions from authorities. I was asked to identify the people, on the posters, but I didn't give them any information. Hiram and I couldn't figure out what was going on or why the officials were looking for the people that we knew. Through the silently open door of the back bedroom, we watched the policeman push Dan Jordan, Ramona's husband, roughly onto a sofa and begin to question him. "Are you Ervil LeBaron?" A tall, gaunt officer with a huge mustache stood over him. Dan hung his head low and mumbled, "Yes." Why isn't Dan telling the officers his real name? I knew my father was in the back room of the apartment, and I watched the policeman go into his room and come out a few times later. Apparently, satisfied with Dan's answer, the police arrested him and Raina and led them out of the apartment in handcuffs because everybody is going to fulfill their role, which is to protect the so-called prophet. So, as a result, even though the guy was right there, he's going to take the heat for this so that the so-called prophet can remain free. Okay. 3 of the federales stayed in the apartment for several more hours. None of us were allowed to leave during that time. I could feel their stares as I did my chores. They frequently demanded that I make them coffee or quiet the little children, and I could see Antonia's added stress as she prepared food for them. So y'all bust up in the house, do all of this stuff, and then expect these people who barely got food and stuff as is to feed you? Okay, corruption at its finest. Naturally, she took out her frustration on Hiram and me. He and I stayed close to one another, barely speaking about the terrifying event. excuse me, even after the authorities vacated the ransacked apartment, the authorities completely missed the fact that Ervil LeBaron had been within their grasp the entire time. Our family called this a miracle of God's protection on my father since there was no other viable explanation. We all believed he was supernaturally spared from being arrested. No, y'all, he wasn't supernaturally spared. What happened was y'all lied. And because y'all lied, he's free. Anyways, y'all, that's it for today's reading. Let me know what your thoughts were. Did we enjoy this or not? Until next time, can y'all see me? I hope y'all can, because y'all know I got to do my peace.